Welcome to the Daily MBA, where business wisdom is served fresh and fast, straight from one of the top MBA programs in the world. I'll give you summaries of my lectures and readings, as well as the most important insights gained from an MBA, so you can apply all of this knowledge in every business. Let's get started. In my last episode, I was telling you everything about recessions and interest rates, and today we're going to be looking at the effect all of that has on the labor market. And for that, we're going to first have to understand some of the basic concepts that are around the labor market, because you first have to understand how it is measured and what are you talking about in order to know what is really unemployment. So first measure that we should consider would be what's called the working age population. So we have a country's population, but then we're going to have a working age population, which is not going to be the entire country because you don't have babies working, for example. So the working age population in the US is going to be all of those who are 16 years and above. In Canada is going to be all of those who are 15 years and above. And so the working age population can then be split into two parts. One part is going to be the labor force, and then the second part is going to be not in the labor force. So who could be people that are in a working age population and are not considered in the labor force? First, it can be people that have their pensions, for example, they are not working anymore. Second, it can be students, for example, they may not be technically unemployed because they are not looking for jobs. They are just studying at the moment. You may also have prisoners, you may have moms or dads. So all of these people that are not in the labor force per se are also going to be taken out. And we're going to then have our little circle of labor force, and labor force is going to hold the two groups that we care about, employed and unemployed. And so unemployed is not just someone who doesn't have a job. For being considered unemployed, you have to be someone who's actively looking for a job, but can't get a job. And so the unemployment rate is usually going to be the amount of people that are unemployed over the labor force. And that is the percentage that usually all of the countries are sharing. And the employed would technically be the opposite, would be the amount of employed people over the labor force. What is another rate that sometimes countries are also looking at is the labor force participation rate. So you just want to see how much of your population is actually working. So this is a very relevant metric in all of the G7 countries that are all the time getting older and older and are having people out of their labor force. So labor force participation rate is usually abbreviated as LFPR, and it would mean labor force number over working age population. So you want to get the total amount over all of those that are over 16 or over 15, depending on how your country's measuring it. So now we have to look at the impact it has of creating new jobs. And this is going to be a very enlightening example and also very exciting because you can see that the impact of jobs is going to be creating magnificent things either for unemployment, but technically also for society, as we're going to better understand with Okun's law. But I won't get ahead of myself. First, let's just understand the new job entrants. And I'm going to be sharing the equation while I'm talking, but basically what we want to consider is the new entry of people into the labor force. So maybe if new jobs are created, those who were outside of the labor force are just going to join in. Maybe the employed number will change, or maybe the unemployed number will change, but those won't be considered for now. We're just going to consider people that are joining the labor force, not switching jobs. And so what we want to consider now is how much would change if we create new jobs. And we would have to consider the equation that I'm sharing, which is U plus NE minus NJ, over U plus and E plus E. Here is going to be the way to measure the impact of new jobs in society. And if you plug in the numbers that you want with any example, you would see that even if new people join the labor force, more jobs created are always going to reduce unemployment. And the lack of job creation will eventually increase unemployment. So that's why it's so important for governments to foster the creation of new jobs, which would usually mean foster the creation of new companies, of startups, of all of these new businesses that are going to be creating jobs in the country, because this is going to help people improve their quality of life and reduce unemployment. So why are there lower levels of unemployment in some countries like US and they are higher in other countries like Europe? Usually, if we could set up a rule of thumb, United States is going to be considered one of the lowest unemployments. Then in the middle is Canada, and then high unemployment is always going to be in Europe. So Europe usually has high levels of unemployment for 3 reasons. First, you have a social safety net that is stronger. So people that don't have a job will actually be subsidized by the government. And so this social safety nets are getting out of their hands because people don't want to get a job if they're already getting money for not having a job. Second is that they have lower incentives to work. And this is related to the social net. So you have no incentive to be looking for a job, and therefore there is more unemployment. And lastly, there are also stronger unions, and the hiring process is not as effective. So for firing people in the European countries, it's going to be way harder than for firing in the US, where you just tell to someone that basically this person has to leave, and in movies they just appear with their box leaving out of the office. So that's also one of the reasons why US has low unemployment. Labor market is way more efficient. You also have different types of labor market measures. So the working age population, as I was telling you, in the US, it's going to be 16 and Canada is 15. And only having this year of difference, it's actually creating a 1% difference in the unemployment rates. And basically, in the US, also passive job search is not classified as a labor force. The measures that they're having are also impacting a little bit their percentage, but it's mostly because they have a way more efficient labor market, and that's why they have better employment levels. But so if we were to consider the optimal unemployment levels, what we have to consider is that we can't get to zero. No country can be without unemployment because first, it's impossible. There are always shifts in the markets. There's people moving in and out, people switching from jobs. There's immigration from other countries. There are industries that are opening, closing. All of the companies and shifts in the market are going to generate a little bit of unemployment. And then also, this reason may sound a little bit bad, but having unemployment, it's actually going to discipline people. Because if you know that there was no unemployment and you could get fired and just get another job, this is going to make people a bit more lazy. So unemployment is going to be a way of discipline for having people keep their job and work hard for keeping their jobs. So what is going to be then the optimal rate if it's not zero? It's going to be depending to every country. I can't give you a number because the natural rate, it will be different from every country. And what you have to consider is the average that it has been for the last 10 years or so. Because the natural fluctuation of unemployment is going to get you to the optimal. If you get levels that are under the optimal, then you'll get inflation. And if you get levels that are above the optimal, your output will go down. And this is going to be related to what I wanted to explain now, that is called Okun's Law. And so what Okun's Law really means is that a 1% increase in unemployment will be associated with a 2% drop in GDP. So this is showing like an opposite relationship. So if you increase unemployment, which is bad for society and for the markets, this is going to have actually higher drop in the GDP. But it's also the opposite. If I increase employment levels by 1%, then this will be associated with a 2% GDP increase. One weird thing is, why is this rule a 2 by 1? Why is this ratio 2? And this is just a rule of thumb, so you don't have to stick with it. But what Oken was trying to show is that this has an inverse relationship. And so when optimal production levels are going to be rising, it's usually because unemployment was falling. And this is going to be a key equation that you're going to be needing when you're talking about unemployment. So hopefully all of this is giving you more hints on how the labor market works, how it's related to inflation, and why the optimal level is not just a random number, but it's going to be the average level of unemployment that you've had for the last 10 years. Maybe all of this you might consider it for the next time that you're looking for a job or trying to create new jobs, because creating new jobs will have a ginormous effect in society. If you like my episodes, you can share them with a friend and also give me a review. And I'll see you next week to keep learning more macroeconomics concept.